Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. That night, the exhaustion hit differently. You know that bone-deep fatigue that sets in after 16 straight hours at the hospital? At 29, I already felt 50. Working as an ER nurse in Cleveland had become my entire existence, especially after my divorce was finalized earlier that year. The highway stretched ahead like a black ribbon, empty except for the occasional semi-thundering past in the opposite lane. It was around 2 a.m., on a Wednesday in late October when everything went wrong. The radio kept cutting in and out with static, which should have been my first sign that something wasn't right. But I just blamed the old antenna on my beat up Ford Explorer. All I wanted was to get home, take the hottest shower imaginable, and collapse into bed before my next shift in 10 hours. About 3 miles from my exit, my headlights caught a figure standing right at the edge of the shoulder where the asphalt met the gravel. My first thought was that someone had broken down. It happens all the time along that stretch of I-71 between downtown and the suburbs. The person was waving both arms above their head, desperate for help, wearing what looked like a dark hoodie with the hood pulled up. My instincts kicked in instantly. Nurses are trained to react when someone's in distress. I started easing off the gas and drifting toward the shoulder, but then something made me glance into the rearview mirror. The road behind me had gone pitch black, like every streetlight had suddenly died, even though they'd been on seconds earlier. That's when I saw them. 2 shapes emerging from behind the concrete guardrail on the passenger side. They moved in this eerie, synchronized way that made every alarm bell in my body go off. They weren't walking or running, more like gliding forward, perfectly parallel, about 15 feet apart. The person waving suddenly dropped their arms and froze. Didn't even look at my car. My foot hovered between the brake and the gas for what felt like forever. Probably just a second. The 2 figures were dressed identically, dark pants, gray hoodies. They were moving toward me with this terrifying sense of purpose, like they'd done this 100 times before. My nursing experience had taught me how to handle aggressive patients, but this was something different. Calculated. Wrong. I slammed my foot on the gas, tires screaming as I swerved back into the lane. In the side mirror, I caught one last glimpse of all 3 of them standing in a perfect line, just watching my taillights fade into the distance. My phone was in the cuff holder. I grabbed it with shaking hands, trying to dial 911 while keeping the car steady at 90. The dispatcher sounded skeptical at first, probably used to late-night false alarms, but something in my voice must have convinced her. She said officers were already in the area and would check it out immediately. I drove way too fast all the way home, constantly checking my mirrors and taking a different exit just in case I was being followed. The adrenaline didn't wear off until I pulled into my apartment complex and sat in the car, engine still running, scanning every shadow between the buildings. My neighbor Frank, a retired cop who chain smokes on his balcony at all hours, waved when he saw me. I must have looked shaken because he actually came down in his bathrobe to check on me. When I told him what happened, his whole expression changed. He said there'd been similar reports along that highway. Always late at night, always the same setup, someone waving for help while others waited nearby. About an hour later, the police called. Sergeant Brennan said they'd found something at the spot I described. Fresh tire marks matching my tread pattern proved I'd stopped there. But what froze me was what else they found. A burned-out sedan about 50 yards further down the shoulder, hidden behind some trees. It had been reported stolen 3 days earlier. Inside were personal items that made it clear someone had been living out of that car. Maps with certain highway exits circled in red ink. One of them was mine. The next morning, I met Brennan at the station. Exhausted, wired, and still in a daze. He showed me grainy traffic camera footage from around midnight, 2 hours before my encounter. The video showed 3 people dragging something heavy from a van into the woods near that same spot. The van had no plates, and the footage was too blurry to see faces, but you could clearly make out their movements. Later, the same camera captured them setting up along the shoulder. One standing where I'd seen the waving figure, the other 2 crouching behind the guardrail. Then Brennan told me something that made my skin crawl. They believed it was part of a carjacking ring targeting solo drivers on empty highways. The burned sedan wasn't their vehicle. It belonged to a woman named Jennifer Huang, who'd been reported missing 5 days earlier after finishing her night shift at a warehouse 40 miles north. Her credit cards had been used at random gas stations heading south, always at night, always once per stop. A detective named Carla Donovan showed me Jennifer's missing person photo. She was about my age, and she was a nurse too. That hit me hard. We'd probably driven that same route hundreds of times, both exhausted after long shifts, both alone in the dark. Detective Donovan said I wasn't the first to encounter them, just the first to report it right away. 2 other drivers had escaped similar setups but waited days to come forward, leaving no trace to investigate. Forensics later confirmed footprints from at least 4 people at the scene, meaning someone else had been watching that I never even saw. All the encounters had happened between midnight and 4 a.m. on weeknights when traffic was light and emergency response times were slow. Donovan gave me her direct number and told me to call if I noticed anyone following me. Because sometimes these groups fixate on the ones who get away. For the next 2 weeks, I changed everything. Different routes, different schedules, never walking to my car alone. Frank checked in on me every night, and I texted Donovan every time I got home safe. Maybe overkill, but it helped me sleep. Then one Monday afternoon I got the call. They'd made arrests. Police had pulled over a van on that same stretch of highway for a broken taillight. Inside were 4 people, including a woman who matched the one I'd seen waving that night. They found rope, zip ties, and multiple stolen license plates. Under the spare tire was Jennifer Huang's hospital ID badge, along with items from at least 6 other missing person cases across 3 states. The trial hasn't started yet, but Detective Donovan says my testimony will be crucial. Jennifer's still missing, along with 2 others linked to the same group. That's what haunts me most. I still work nights. Bills don't wait just because you're scared. But now I take city streets instead of the highway. Adds 20 minutes, but I don't care. Even in daylight, when I see someone stranded on the roadside, my chest tightens and I have to remind myself to breathe. Because I know that if I'd stopped just a few seconds longer that night, if I'd let instinct win over fear, I'd be another missing nurse on a police bulletin. Another burned-out car on the shoulder. Another story that never got told. At 31, I'd been driving cross-country routes for my job as a medical equipment sales rep for almost 6 years. The worst thing that had ever happened was a flat tire in broad daylight. But that night in early September 2022 changed everything about how I travel now. I'd just finished a late presentation at a hospital in Des Moines and was heading to my next appointment in Kansas City, figuring I'd drive straight through the night and grab a motel room when I got there around 4 in the morning. My silver Toyota Camry had been acting up lately, making a grinding noise whenever I turned left too sharply. My mechanic buddy said it was probably just low-power steering fluid. Nothing urgent. I'd been meaning to get it checked, but between constant sales trips and finalizing my divorce from Brian, it kept slipping down the list. The highway stretched ahead of me, endless and empty. One of those long rural stretches where the nearest town is 40 miles away in either direction. Just cornfields and darkness on both sides. Around midnight, the temperature gauge started creeping up. First, just a little past center, which happens on long drives sometimes. But within minutes, it was pushing into the red zone, and that sweet, burnt smell of overheating coolant filled the cabin. I pulled onto the shoulder, hazard lights clicking in rhythm with my heartbeat, and shut off the engine before it could cook itself. Steam hissed from under the hood almost immediately, rising in ghostly white wisps that twisted through my headlights and vanished into the dark. When the ticking of the cooling engine faded, the silence hit me like a physical weight. No crickets. No wind. Just the hollow stillness of nowhere. I checked my phone. No signal. Not even emergency service. Just that mocking, no service, message on the screen. I sat there for 20 minutes, doors locked, windows cracked to keep from fogging up, scrolling through useless offline apps to distract myself from the growing anxiety. Every few minutes, I popped the hood and checked. But the steam was still rising, the metal still too hot to touch. The owner's manual said to wait at least 30 minutes before removing the radiator cap. Something I couldn't do anyway since I didn't have coolant or even a bottle of water. Highway 169 is notorious for being deserted at night. I'd passed maybe 3 cars in the last hour, and now, approaching 1 in the morning, the odds of anyone coming by were slim to none. So when I finally saw a faint glow in my side mirror, headlights several miles back, I actually said, "Thank God," out loud. I started rehearsing when they stopped, planning to offer $50 if they'd just follow me to the nearest gas station once my car cooled enough to limp there. The lights grew closer slowly, which made sense. It's a straight, flat road with miles of visibility. Eventually, I could tell it wasn't a regular car. Too tall, too wide. Probably a pickup or an SUV, maybe a van. I grabbed my phone's flashlight, stepped out, and stood by my open driver's door, ready to wave them down. No way anyone could miss me. A lone woman next to a disabled car with hazard lights flashing on an empty highway. The vehicle began to slow about a quarter mile away. Relief washed over me. At least they were stopping. But instead of pulling over normally, it kept creeping forward, 5 miles per hour, maybe less for 100 yards. The headlights were blinding now, aimed directly at me. All I could see through the glare was the shape of a large van. Tall, boxy, probably white or gray. It finally stopped across from me in the opposite lane, engine idling rough and loud, like it had been modified to sound deeper and meaner. I waited for someone to roll down a window or step out, but nothing happened. The headlights stayed on full beam, burning into my eyes. 30 seconds passed, then a minute. The van just sat there rumbling, the sound vibrating through the pavement and into my chest. I waved my phone's light and called out, "Hey, thanks for stopping," but my voice sounded weak against the noise. No answer. I took 1 step forward, then stopped cold. Every instinct in me screamed that something wasn't right. Maybe they were scared to approach a stranger. Maybe they were on the phone calling for help on my behalf. But the primitive part of my brain, the one that doesn't need logic, was begging me to get back in the car. I backed up slowly, never turning my back on the van, and slid into the driver's seat. My fingers found the lock button, and the solid thunk of all 4 doors engaging gave me a tiny illusion of safety. The van's engine revved a little, just enough to make the noise rise and fall in a low growl. Then I saw it. The driver's door cracked open 2 or 3 inches. No interior light came on. It stayed that way for 10 seconds. I could swear someone was watching me through the gap. Then it closed again. A clean, heavy thump. My heart was hammering. I jammed the key into the ignition and turned it. The starter whined, the engine coughed but wouldn't catch. Grinding noises. The kind that meant I'd be paying for a new engine later. If I made it out of this at all. The temperature gauge was still red. I didn't care. I just needed to move. The van hadn't budged, but then I noticed something worse. Another set of headlights in my rearview mirror. Another large vehicle, creeping up behind me. It stopped about the same distance back as the van in front, boxing me in completely. Both sets of headlights were on high beam, flooding my car with white light from every angle. I grabbed my phone, praying for even 1 bar of signal. Nothing. I held it near the window, waving it around like that would somehow help. That's when I heard it. Car doors opening. Not slamming. Opening. From both vehicles at once. Through the blinding light, I could barely see figures moving. 2 from the van, at least 1 from the vehicle behind me. They stayed at the edge of the beams, keeping to the shadows, their movements slow and deliberate. 1 came up to the passenger side window and just stood there. I could see dark clothes, maybe jeans and a jacket, but their face was hidden above the window line. They didn't knock. Didn't try the handle. Just stood there, breathing. Another figure appeared at my driver's side, same distance away, same eerie stillness. I realized they were positioned so I couldn't open either door without hitting them. 2 more shapes moved around the front and back. I was surrounded. No one spoke. No one moved. The only sound was the twin engines idling and my own shaky breathing fogging the glass. I gripped my phone like it was a weapon, even though I knew it wasn't. Then, the one by my passenger window tapped twice on the glass. Soft, almost polite. I froze. A moment later, the one by my driver's side did the exact same thing. 2 taps, perfectly in sync. That's when I knew this wasn't random. It wasn't some group of drunks or opportunists. It was planned. Rehearsed. They'd done this before. My brain started firing off every desperate idea. Ram the van, drive through the cornfield, scream anything. But before I could do anything, all 4 of them stepped back. 1 step each, still facing me, still silent. The one in front lifted a hand and made a small rolling motion, like they were telling me to start the car and go. I didn't wait. I turned the key again, whispering prayers and promises to the universe. The engine turned over once, twice, and then roared to life, rough, rattling, but running. The temperature gauge slammed into red, but I threw it in drive anyway. I hit the gas. The car lurched forward maybe 3 feet before dying completely. The dashboard went black. Even the hazard lights went out. Dead, silent. Then both vehicles killed their headlights. Absolute darkness swallowed everything. My phone screen was the only light left, casting a pale blue glow inside the car. I held it up, trying to see, but the figures were gone, or maybe just invisible in the dark. For 30 long seconds, nothing happened. Then both engines roared back to life. No lights this time. I heard them pulling away in opposite directions, tires crunching on gravel. Within seconds, they were gone, swallowed by the night. I sat there shaking, paralyzed. I don't know how long I stayed before forcing myself to get out and start walking, using my phone's flashlight to follow the shoulder, checking behind me every few steps. I walked for nearly 2 hours before a state trooper found me. When I told him what happened, he just nodded, like he'd heard it before. He said there'd been similar reports from that same stretch of Highway 169. They never found any proof. Just abandoned vehicles and terrified survivors. 2 other drivers who'd broken down there had been found days later, locked in their cars, catatonic, unable to explain what happened in the missing hours. They think it's some kind of group. Maybe a cult. Maybe a carjacking ring. Maybe something worse. I was lucky, the trooper said, that my car died completely. I went through therapy for months after that. Even now, 2 years later, I can't drive at night without feeling panic rise in my throat. I take flights whenever possible. And when I have to drive, I only travel in daylight with plenty of people around. What haunts me isn't what happened. It's what didn't. What might have happened if my car hadn't died, or if I'd gotten out when they surrounded me. Sometimes late at night, I think about that stretch of highway, and I wonder if they're still out there, waiting for the next broken down car. The Peterbilt's engine had been rattling for the last 100 miles. Nothing major, but enough to keep me tense on that cold November 2023 haul. At 39, my body already felt twice its age. Too many years bouncing in truck cabs, living on gas station food, and catching sleep in rest areas. I was hauling agricultural equipment from Omaha to Denver, a run that usually took about 10 hours if everything went right. Nancy had packed those roast beef sandwiches she always makes, the ones with the horseradish spread that burns just enough to wake you up. Wrapped tight in foil, they were waiting in the cooler beside me. I kept thinking about getting home in time for my daughter Megan's basketball game that Saturday morning. She'd been practicing her free throws all month, and I promised I wouldn't miss this one. The Nebraska rest stop near mile marker 287 sits about 40 miles west of Grand Island. One of those newer ones, federally funded, clean, bright, and stocked with vending machines that actually work. I pulled in around 3 a.m., ready to stretch my legs and grab some coffee before pushing through the last few hours to Denver. The parking lot caught me off guard, at least 15 cars scattered across the regular section. Sedans, SUVs, a couple of minivans, all kinds of license plates. Way more than you'd expect at that hour. Sometimes you hit these random clusters of travelers, maybe dodging weather or construction farther up the highway. The truck area, though, was almost empty. Just me and 2 other rigs at the far end, their marker lights glowing faint orange in the dark. I grabbed my Carhartt jacket, thick quilted, the one Nancy got me 2 Christmases ago, and stepped out into the cold. It was the kind of sharp, dry cold that freezes your nose hairs the second you breathe in. As I passed the row of parked cars, something felt off. Like when you can't remember if you locked your front door, but can't shake the thought. Every windshield was covered in frost, the thin layer that builds up after sitting for hours. But under that frost, the glass looked fog, like the cars had been running just moments before. The yellow parking lot lights stretched shadows across the asphalt like long, dark fingers. The automatic doors whooshed open, and that blast of artificial warmth hit me, the smell of old coffee and industrial cleaner filling my lungs. The place was silent except for the steady hum of the vending machines, their flickering lights giving the whole lobby a tired, buzzing glow. I headed for the men's room, my boots echoing against the polished concrete floor. The bathroom door was wedged open with a wet floor cone, even though the tile was completely dry. Inside, every faucet was dripping in perfect rhythm, like someone had turned them all just enough to leak in sync. The mirrors were fogged at face height, like a dozen people had just stood there breathing on them. I finished up quick. That uneasy feeling was crawling up my spine like ice water. When I went to wash my hands, every soap dispenser was empty, yet there were still streaks of pink suds sliding down the sinks. The paper towel dispensers hung open, brown paper streaming down to the floor, like someone had yanked them out in a panic. I wiped my hands on my jeans and got out of there. Back in the lobby, I noticed the brochure rack near the door. All the pamphlets, hotels, local attractions, had been pulled out, scattered across the floor, a few leading in a trail toward the exit. But what really froze me were the vending machines. Every single item had been selected. The metal coils had all spun to their endpoints, but nothing had dropped. Bags of chips, candy bars, bottles of soda, all hanging there, suspended like gravity had just given up. Something made me look out the window. Maybe I already knew what I'd see. The 15 cars were still there under the yellow lights, but now I could see inside them. Every driver's seat was reclined all the way back, like the drivers had either been giants or left in a hurry, and every door, slightly ajar. Not open, just cracked an inch or two. No dumb lights on, though the keys were still in every ignition. The metal glinted under the lights, keychains dangling rabbit's feet, bottle openers, tiny photos in plastic frames. My mouth went dry, heartbeat pounding loud enough to feel in my ears. I started backing toward the doors, trying to look casual even though there wasn't a soul in sight. Coffee could wait. Everything could wait. I just needed to get back to my truck and go. As I stepped outside, the cold air hit, and with it came a smell. Burnt rubber mixed with something sweet like caramel, but wrong. Synthetic. The lot seemed darker now, though nothing had changed. Then I heard it. A low humming sound, almost too faint to notice. Like 100 people humming the same note just below hearing range. My boots crunched on something. Broken cell phones. Dozens of them, shattered across the asphalt like someone had smashed every screen on purpose. My pace quickened to a near jog, fingers fumbling for my truck keys. The 2 other rigs I'd seen earlier were still parked, but now their doors hung open too. Cabs empty. As I passed the row of cars, more details jumped out. Purses left on seats. Coffee cups still steaming in cup holders. A baby's car seat with its straps undone. One minivan had a backseat DVD player still running. Some cartoon looping endlessly, its blue light flickering through the frosted glass. Different license plates, Nebraska, Iowa, Colorado, Wyoming, but each car had the same thing, a parking receipt tucked under the wiper. All time-stamped within the last hour. 15 cars. 15 groups of people, all gone in under 60 minutes. I reached my truck, hand shaking on the door handle when I heard it, engines turning over, one after another, like a wave rolling through the lot. Every single car came to life. No headlights, no movement, just idling. That low, steady purr of engines warming up. White exhaust poured from the tailpipes, but the smoke didn't rise. It crept along the ground, sliding sideways toward my truck like fog with intent. And then the radios turned on. Not one, not two, all of them. A jumble of voices filled the night. Dozens talking at once, none in conversation. Just fragments, a woman singing, "Happy Birthday," a man ordering lunch, a kid asking to stop for the bathroom. Random overlapping human noise. Underneath it all, I could hear breathing. Dozens of breaths perfectly in sync, coming from inside those cars. Cars I could see were completely empty. My hand finally found the ignition, and I hauled myself into the cab, slamming the door hard enough to shake the frame. My fingers missed the slot twice before the key slid in. The Peterbilt roared awake, that familiar diesel rumble booming in my chest. Normally that sound calms me. Not that night. Every headlight in the lot switched on at once. Front, back, brake, reverse, all of them. My cab exploded with white and red light, shadows jumping across the dashboard like living things. The voices on the radios grew frantic, louder, overlapping into this wall of sound that pierced through the glass, and then I saw them, reflected in my side mirrors. Figures, one behind each car. Perfectly still, all facing me. I turned to look directly. Nothing. Checked the mirror again. They were there. Looked again. Gone. I slammed the truck into gear and floored it, tearing out of that rest stop faster than I'd ever driven a rig. Tires screamed. I didn't care. In my mirror, Those lights followed me, not the cars, just the lights, staying exactly the same distance no matter how hard I pushed. They kept pace for 5 miles down I-80 before flicking out all at once, leaving me in darkness except for my own headlights. I didn't stop until Denver. Didn't even check the rattling under the hood that had gotten worse during the escape. When I told my dispatcher what happened, he laughed, said I must have dozed off and dreamed it. But I know what I saw. 3 days later, I read about it online. 17 vehicles found abandoned at that same rest stop, engines running, keys still in the ignition. No trace of drivers or passengers. The report blamed organized crime or human trafficking, but they never found anyone. Not a single body. I never took that route again. Told my dispatcher I'd quit before I drove through Nebraska after dark. Nancy thinks I had a breakdown. Maybe she's right. Easier to let her believe that than to explain what really happened. Still, every once in a while, when I'm driving alone at night, I'll catch headlights in the mirror that stay the same distance for too long. When that happens, I pull into the nearest truck stop and wait it out with other drivers, pretending to check my logbook or grab coffee until the feeling passes. I still drive for a living. Bills don't pay themselves, but I plan my routes differently now. Always near towns when 3 a.m. rolls around. And I never stop at rest areas that have too many cars but no people. Because that's what keeps me up sometimes. Turning it over in my head like a puzzle missing its last piece. Where did those people go? And what were those things in the mirrors? The ones that vanish when you look straight at them. A month ago, another trucker named Glenn told me something at a Flying J outside Denver that froze my blood. His cousin drives the same stretch of I-80. One night, around 3 in the morning, he saw several trucks sitting there, engines idling, doors open, no drivers. And he swears he saw someone in his side mirror walking between the rigs, checking each cab like they were searching for something. When he turned to look directly, nothing was there. But in the mirror, clear as day, the figure kept moving from truck to truck. We compared dates. It was exactly 1 month after my run. Glenn's cousin won't drive that route anymore either. Makes you wonder how many of us have seen something out there and just never said a word. All I know is that place isn't right. And whatever's out there, it's still out there. Still hunting. Still collecting. 5 months ago, when I turned 36, I realized my life had become an endless stretch of highways and the steady hum of 18 wheels on asphalt. Trucking paid the bills and kept me constantly on the move, hauling everything from furniture to frozen food across state lines. That week in early May, I was hauling a load of electronics from Phoenix to Chicago, a route full of long, empty desert roads. My marriage had fallen apart 6 months earlier, and honestly, the solitude of the open road felt like exactly what I needed. My Peterbilt's cab had become more of a home than my apartment back in Tucson. That night, the one that still makes me check my mirrors more than I should, started like any other long haul. The fuel gauge had been fording with empty for the last 20 miles, and finding a station open at 2 in the morning on Highway 89 wasn't easy. When a faded Shell sign finally appeared through the darkness, glowing like a beacon against the black desert sky, I felt instant relief. The place looked ancient. 2 old pumps, a cracked concrete lot, and a small convenience store that hadn't seen a remodel since the 70s. Not another vehicle in sight, which wasn't surprising at that hour. The flickering fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I pulled in and shut down the engine. The sudden silence pressed against my ears, broken only by the tick of cooling metal and the faint hum of the store's air conditioner. I grabbed my wallet, stepped down from the cab and stretched my stiff joints. The desert air was still warm, carrying that dry, dusty smell of creosote. My boots crunched on the gravel as I walked to the pump, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. Through the dirty glass window, I could just make out someone behind the counter, motionless. The pump looked ancient, the kind where you could actually hear the fuel rushing through the hose. I started filling up and leaned against the truck, watching the numbers climb 40 gallons, 50-60. A fill-up like this would easily run me close to $300. The clerk inside hadn't moved once. Even from outside, something about his posture was off, stiff, head tilted slightly, like he was listening for something. The light above him kept flickering, making him appear and disappear like an old film skipping frames. When the pump clicked off at 78 gallons, I hung up the nozzle and headed toward the door. As I got closer, I saw more details. He was young, early 20s maybe, wearing a faded red shell shirt hanging loose on his thin frame. His face was pale, eyes ding between the door and the counter. When I pushed the door open, the bell gave a weak chime, and the kid nearly jumped out of his skin. "Just the diesel," I said, trying to sound casual. The store smelled like burnt coffee and something metallic. Maybe rust, maybe blood. His name tag said, Aaron. Up close, he looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes. Behind him, a flickering security screen showed static-filled footage of the lot outside. 3LT.47, he whispered, barely audible. His hands shook as he typed on the old register. When I handed over my card, our fingers brushed. His skin was ice cold despite the warm night. He gripped the counter edge so hard his knuckles went white. The receipt printer screeched to life, and he flinched like he'd been shocked. "You traveling alone?" he asked suddenly, meeting my eyes. Before I could answer, he leaned forward, eyes flicking toward the door. "Doesn't matter," he said quietly. "When you leave, drive fast. Don't stop for anything." He slid the receipt across the counter, his hands trembling. Then he grabbed my wrist, his grip desperate. "And don't open that door again. Once you're out, just go. Please." The fear in his eyes hit me hard. Whatever this was, it wasn't a joke. I pulled my hand free, pocketed the receipt, and walked out without another word. Behind me, I heard him let out a sound, half a sob, half a prayer. The walk back to my truck felt longer than before. The darkness outside the station lights seemed to press closer. I climbed into the cab, locked the doors, and fired up the engine. The diesel's rumble was comforting after the tension in that store. I had just put the truck in gear when I heard it. 3 slow knocks on the passenger window. I froze. The lights didn't reach that side of the cab, so all I saw was darkness. Then a voice came through the glass, calm and clear despite the engine noise. "Come on, Richard. Open up, we need to talk." Every muscle in my body locked up. That voice had said my name, my real name, which I hadn't told anyone at the station. The company card I'd paid with didn't have it. My license was in my wallet. There was no way this person could know. "Richard." The voice came again, patient and friendly. "Just crack the window. 5 minutes. That's all I need." Something deep inside me screamed, "Don't look, don't answer." I slammed the truck into gear and pulled out fast. In the mirror, I saw a tall, thin figure in a dark suit step back into the shadows. "Richard, you're making this harder than it needs to be." The voice called out, somehow clear over the roar of the engine. "I'll see you at the next stop, mile marker 277. You have to stop there." My stomach dropped. Mile marker 277 was the way station, mandatory for all commercial trucks. Skipping it could cost me my CDL. But how could this person possibly know that? I pushed the rig up to 70, flying down the empty highway. My phone's GPS glowed on the dash, and that's when I noticed. It now read, Richard's route. Something I'd never programmed. When I opened my recent search history, my blood ran cold. My ex-wife's address. My mother's nursing home, my daughter's college dorm. All there. The mile markers flew past, 251, 250, 249, counting down to something I didn't want to face. I tried calling 911, but there was no service, even though my phone showed full bars. The CB radio, usually buzzing with trucker chatter, was dead silent. At mile 265, I decided to try for the truck stop at exit 38, a flying J, big, well-lit, full of people. But when I hit the brakes, nothing happened. The pedal felt normal, but the truck didn't slow down. The wheel still turned, but it was like someone else had control. The exit lights blurred past. Panic set in as I realized someone had hacked my truck. Then, just ahead, I saw it, the way station, mile marker 277. My truck began to slow on its own, brakes suddenly working again. Standing by a black sedan was a man in a dark suit, the same one from before. He waved casually as my truck rolled to a stop on the scale. He approached slowly, his face clear under the lights. Mid-40s, clean-shaven, pale blue eyes almost white. He tapped on my window. "Richard, please step out. We need to talk about your cargo." "My cargo?" I whispered. It was just electronics. He smiled faintly and lifted a tablet glowing green. "Your manifest says electronics, but we both know there's an extra package, serial number X7429. You weren't supposed to know, but plans changed." I turned toward the sleeper cab. There, wedged between my duffel bag and the wall, was a metal briefcase I'd never seen. A red light blinked on its surface. "Previous driver put it there yesterday," he said. "You've been carrying it 300 miles without knowing. Now, Two choices: handed over and walk away, or refuse. He held up his phone, showing live footage of my daughter entering her dorm room. Rebecca. Room 314, Preston Hall. She keeps the window open, doesn't she? My body went cold. I grabbed the briefcase, climbed out, and handed it to him. The moment I stepped on the ground, my truck's engine restarted on its own. "Smart man," he said, checking the seals. "Your truck will work fine now. And Richard, don't stop at any more gas stations tonight. Take I-40 straight to Amarillo. Aaron, that kid at the Shell, he won't make it through his shift if you go back." He turned, got into his car, and disappeared into the darkness. My truck worked perfectly after that. I drove straight through to Chicago, delivered the load, and told no one. 3 days later, I saw the news. A 23-year-old clerk named Aaron Vasquez found dead at a Shell on Highway 89. Cause apparent heart attack. That was 5 months ago. I changed my route. I only drive in daylight now. And every Sunday, when my daughter calls to complain about her hot dorm room, I just thank God she's still safe.